Our publicist said the Grand Ole Opry star passed away about an hour ago here in Nashville.
Rest in peace, Jeannie Seely. Her family have come out and revealed Jeannie's final days and final 24 hours that they thought she would want to share with Opry fans across the world. She wakes before sunrise, brews the same brand of coffee she's sworn by since 1972, and sits alone on her back porch just outside Nashville. There, she watches the sun rise over the misty Tennessee hills with a journal in her lap and a silence so thick it hums. Some mornings, she writes lyrics she'll never release. Other days, she just stares out, lips tight, whispering names only she remembers. While the world spins forward, chasing fresh fame and new stars, Jeannie copes with the weight of having lived through everything and being remembered for almost none of it. Her old records still sell in Europe. Her voice still echoes through the Grand Ole Opry. But in her private world, Jeannie lives quietly in the shadows of memories, tragedy, and one final truth she's never dared speak aloud, until now. She was born Marilyn Jean Seely in Titusville, Pennsylvania, in 1940, a town so small it had one grocery store, one church, and one radio tower. Her parents were steel workers and farmers, hardened by war and time. But even as a child, Jeannie's voice had a lilt that turned heads. By age 4, she was harmonizing with the wind through the trees. By 16, she was sneaking into late-night bars just to feel the rhythm of live country music. She knew she didn't belong in Titusville. She was too fiery, too emotional, too bold. She dreamed in rhinestones, while the world around her settled for plaid. In the early 60s, she boarded a Greyhound bus to Los Angeles, with little more than $50 and a burning conviction that Nashville would eventually call her name. She found herself working secretarial jobs in music publishing offices by day, writing songs on diner napkins by night. Her big break came when she penned "Anyone Who Knows What Love Is Will Understand," which Irma Thomas recorded, and decades later was featured in Black Mirror, reminding the world that Jeannie's songwriting was timeless. But it wasn't until she finally moved to Nashville that she truly transformed. She signed with Monument Records and released "Don't Touch Me" in 1966. It hit like lightning, shooting to number 2 on the charts and earning her a Grammy, the first woman to win for Best Country Vocal Performance. She didn't just break in, she broke rules. Jeannie wore mini skirts on the Opry stage when it was still taboo. She smoked, cursed, wrote from a woman's perspective, and refused to soften her edges for the comfort of conservative audiences. Still, behind that boldness was a deep ache. Her marriage to songwriter Hank Cochran, the man behind hits like "Make the World Go Away," had highs that inspired duets and lows that cracked her voice in interviews. The divorce hit her harder than she let on. She buried the pain in her work, performing endlessly and writing songs soaked in heartbreak. Yet she never stopped climbing. Through the 70s and 80s, she became a fixture at the Grand Ole Opry, not just as a performer, but as a force. But fame is a fickle friend. By the 90s, the industry that once celebrated her began to shift. New voices came, record executives changed, and Jeannie's name fell further down the bill. Awards shows stopped calling. Younger artists didn't always know who she was. She smiled through it. But privately, she grieved, not just for the spotlight, but for the fading of a golden era she had helped build. And yet, in 2025, Jeannie Seely still wakes up with a purpose, still sings, still writes, still stands behind the Opry curtain before every performance, whispering to herself like a prayer, "Don't forget who you are." The Grand Ole Opry isn't just a stage to Jeannie Seely. It's a living memory, a sacred ground where ghosts whisper from the wings, and every note carries the weight of generations. Jeannie joined the Opry in 1967, and while many stars have come and gone, she's become something rarer. a constant. For over 5 decades, she's stood in that circle of wood, singing songs of love, pain, and survival, not out of habit, but out of reverence. Even now, at 85, she performs there more than almost anyone else, slipping into rhinestone-studded gowns stitched by hand, walking carefully in high heels that carry stories no one else knows. But something changed after the pandemic. The lights still shine bright on the Opry stage, but the energy backstage? It's quieter. She's seen friends pass away, some slowly, others suddenly. Whispered announcements of heart attacks, diagnoses, or just didn't wake up this morning. And every time, Jeannie pauses longer in front of her dressing room mirror, not out of vanity, but out of gratitude. Her voice may have softened, but it still rises when it matters. Her hair may take longer to style, but it still holds shape under the spotlight. She's still here, and she knows she shouldn't be. Behind the scenes, though, Jeannie carries more than her songs. She carries grief. In her private moments, she still talks about her only child, the one she never got to raise. A pregnancy lost in her early 20s that she rarely mentioned publicly. It haunted her, and she poured that pain into lyrics that never made it to the radio. She also lost her second husband, Nashville attorney Gene Ward, in 2016. He was her rock in the later years, the one who drove her to shows, calmed her nerves, and reminded her that she still mattered. When he passed, Jeannie kept performing, but something in her shifted. She started sleeping with the TV on, started writing letters she never sent, started talking to the empty passenger seat in her car. And still, she shows up, makeup on, boots polished, smile wide. But it's not performance, it's resilience. Every time she steps into the circle at the Opry, she's not just singing a song, she's standing against time, telling it, "Not yet." And the audience, young and old, rises to their feet. Not because she's famous, but because she's still fighting, still showing up, still surviving. There's a strange silence that follows Jeannie Seely home after a night at the Opry. The applause fades, the spotlight cools, the makeup comes off, and what remains is a quiet house filled with echoes, pictures on the wall, trophies collecting dust, and memories stacked like records on shelves. At 85 years old, Jeannie doesn't live in a mansion, but she does live in history. Her home outside Nashville is lined with framed newspaper clippings, fan letters, and shelves of vinyl that include her own albums right beside the legends she once toured with. Patsy Cline, Dottie West, Ernest Tubb. She's not just a part of country music. She is country music. But the music business doesn't always remember that. In recent years, Jeannie has spoken publicly, though gently, about how the industry tends to erase older women. Not with cruelty, but with indifference. Award shows rarely call. Country radio won't play her. TV specials favor newcomers with a few hits over legends with a lifetime of service. She doesn't say it bitterly, but the truth hangs in her voice like a ghost note. She jokes about being the oldest girl at the dance, but even jokes wear thin when you're the only one left from your era still dancing. Behind the stage gowns and signature wit is a woman who often eats dinner alone, reheats coffee in the microwave, and sits at a kitchen table writing lyrics that may never be recorded. She still writes every morning, sometimes on legal pads, sometimes in the margins of old church bulletins. She'll hum a melody, stare at the rain, and whisper a line to herself before scribbling it down. Some mornings, she talks to her dog, a tiny rescue she calls her studio assistant. Other days, the silence is too heavy, so she'll turn on an old Willie Nelson record and let it fill the room. But she's not bitter. She's wise. She's endured. While others faded, Jeannie adapted. She launched a podcast before most of her peers even owned smartphones. She joined TikTok, slowly, carefully, at the urging of a younger fan who volunteers to help her post. And she started mentoring up-and-coming female songwriters, reminding them that their stories matter even if Nashville doesn't always listen. Her advice? Don't shrink yourself for their comfort, and never let them tell you you're too much. She says it with a wink, but it comes from a place of truth carved by decades of being both celebrated and overlooked. In this strange twilight of her life, Jeannie Seely finds peace, not in recognition, but in resilience. Her career isn't about comebacks, it's about staying power. And that might be the rarest achievement in all of music. Jeannie Seely's journey through country music wasn't just shaped by songs and stages, it was shaped by the men who tried and failed to mold her. In the 1960s and 70s, Nashville was a city of cowboy hats and closed doors. Female artists were often expected to smile, sing sweet, and stay silent when the deals were made. But Jeannie, she refused. She pushed back, and for every moment she was celebrated on stage, there was another behind the scenes where she was told to tone it down or act more ladylike. Some of the biggest producers in country music sat across from her in studio offices and told her she was too strong-willed to be marketable. One famous label exec once said to her face, "You sing with too much attitude." Women don't buy records from other women who sound that confident. Jeannie didn't flinch. She leaned in and replied, "Then I'll make music for the men who can handle it." She recorded songs other women were too scared to touch. Songs about divorce, about desire, about loneliness that wasn't gentle. And while those lyrics made her a trailblazer, they also made her a target. Radio DJs often ignored her records. Tour promoters offered her half of what her male counterparts were paid. One tour bus driver once told her she'd never make it more than 2 years in the industry. That was in 1966. She's still here. And the men in her personal life? They tried too. Jeannie's first marriage ended when she realized she was shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's expectations. Her second marriage, though full of love, still came with challenges. She loved Gene Ward, but she also insisted on keeping her independence. Even at the height of their marriage, she made it clear, "I don't want to be saved. I want to be respected." She's spoken in interviews about how lonely it was to stand her ground, how the industry turned cold when she refused to smile and nod, but she never backed down. She'd rather be alone than be controlled. And that choice, repeated year after year, shaped the version of Jeannie Seely we see today. Fierce, funny, and still unbending. Her strength cost her roles on radio, TV slots, and platinum records. But it bought her something greater, a voice that has never been silenced, a presence that outlived trends, and a truth that only comes from living life on your own terms. Jeannie Seely never needed a man to define her legacy. She carved it herself, with grit, grace, and a voice that still cuts through the noise. Every Saturday night, the lights of the Grand Ole Opry still shine, just like they have for nearly a century. And most weekends, if you wait long enough, you'll see her, Jeannie Seely, now 85, stepping onto that stage like she's been doing since 1967. She's not just a guest anymore, she is the Opry, the longest-running female member in its history. But if you ask her, she doesn't walk out there to make history. She walks out there to keep the ghosts company. The Opry is more than a stage to Jeannie. It's a sanctuary and a graveyard. She's performed with nearly every legend who's passed through its doors. Dottie West, Jack Green, George Jones, Loretta Lynn, little Jimmy Dickens. One by one, they've all left. And now, when she steps into the wings, she often stands alone. "Sometimes I feel like I'm singing to their spirits," she once said, "like maybe they're still listening, just from a different seat." She always wears something glittery, something bright. Not because she wants to shine, but because she feels a duty to remind the crowd what country music used to feel like. Personal, raw, glamorous, in its own broken way. Her microphone has history. Her voice still carries weight, and when she sings a ballad about heartbreak or memory, you can almost feel the air pause around her. But when the show ends, the reality hits harder. The dressing rooms are quieter than they used to be. Fewer people knock on her door. Younger artists, if they do greet her, sometimes don't know the depth of the woman they're shaking hands with. She doesn't take it personally. She just lets the silence settle, packs up her bag, and walks the long hallway back out to the parking lot. That walk is where the truth lives. Sometimes it's late and cold. Sometimes it's raining. But Jeannie insists on walking herself out. No entourage, no assistant. Just a woman, a purse, and a slow stroll into the Tennessee night. And every step she takes down that dim hallway is a reminder that legends don't vanish. They just move more quietly with time. The Opry still calls her name. The spotlight still remembers where to land. But more and more, she knows the curtain will one day close for good. She doesn't fear it. She just wants to make sure that when it does, she's already said everything worth saying. And when her footsteps finally echo for the last time backstage, she hopes someone's listening. Because those ghosts, they're not just memories. They're warnings of what fame forgets, of what the spotlight hides, of how even the greatest voices can be left behind unless someone keeps singing. Part 7. The house, the silence, and the secret she's been keeping. Nestled just outside of Nashville, down a winding back road few fans have ever seen, sits a modest white home with peeling shutters, a creaky porch swing, and a rusted mailbox that still reads Seely. It's not a mansion. It's not the kind of place you'd expect a living legend to call home. But for Jeannie Seely, this quiet house holds more history than any gold record on her wall. Because this is where she came to grieve, to heal, and, most importantly, to hide. Inside, the air smells faintly of lavender and old records. There's a turntable in the corner, worn from decades of use. The kitchen hasn't changed since the 70s. Yellow linoleum, Formica countertops, coffee mugs with chips on the rim. Her bedroom window faces the woods. She says she likes watching the deer at dawn. But what most don't know is that this house, this silence, was once her only refuge when everything else fell apart. After the passing of her second husband, Gene Ward, Jeannie didn't talk to anyone for weeks. Friends said she'd answer the phone just to hang it up again. She stopped playing music around the house, canceled interviews, disappeared from public life for a while. People thought she was fine, because she still smiled when the cameras were rolling. But the truth was, she was drowning in a sorrow no spotlight could soften. And deep in this home, behind a locked closet door in the back hallway, lies something even closer to her heart. Something almost no one has seen. A box, wrapped in old lace, tied with faded ribbon, containing dozens of handwritten letters, not to her, from her to the people she's lost. Each one written after a funeral, a heartbreak, or a night when she couldn't sleep. Letters to her late husband, to her mother, to Dottie West, to Jack Green, even one addressed to the girl I used to be. She never intended to send them. She just needed to speak where no one could interrupt. And every so often, when the weight of her own history becomes too much to bear, she opens the closet, unties the ribbon, and reads one, out loud, to no one and everyone at once. She's never made a documentary, never written a memoir, because the truth, she says, lives between those letters. in what was never said on the Opry stage, in what she could only whisper to an empty room. There's a reason she's kept them private. Some pains don't need an audience. Some stories aren't ready to be told. But the older she gets, the more she wonders if maybe one day she'll let the world read them. Maybe when she's gone. Maybe before. Because in those pages lies not just the story of Jeannie Seely, but the full weight of what it cost her to become a legend. Tucked between her couch cushions, stacked on the end table beside a flickering lamp, are dozens of photo albums. Some so worn the spines are cracking, others still wrapped in plastic, never opened. Jeannie Seely keeps them close, not for vanity, not to show visitors, but because they remind her who she used to be and who she might be the last to remember. Flip through the pages and you'll find the full spectrum of a life lived in rhinestones and heartbreak. There she is, in the early 60s, smiling beside a beat-up car with a guitar in the trunk. A few pages later, she's standing backstage at the Opry with Loretta Lynn, arms linked, grinning like sisters. Then come the darker ones, photos of Jack Green with a drink in his hand and a storm in his eyes. Candid shots of Dottie West, hours before a show. A Polaroid of Jeannie sitting alone in a dressing room, eyes puffy from tears, mascara smudged. But what stings the most aren't the images. It's the silence surrounding them. The calls that no longer come. The birthdays forgotten. The anniversaries that pass with no flowers, no songs. In the last few years, Jeannie has watched the phone ring less and less. The industry she gave everything to has quietly moved on. New stars rise, award shows honor fresh faces, and the Opry lineup rotates more quickly than ever. She never complains publicly. That's not her style. But privately, in the quiet of her kitchen or while brushing her hair before bed, the fear creeps in. What if I'm already gone and nobody noticed? What if the world is forgetting her in real time? Not with a scandal, not with a bang, but with soft indifference. Like a song that fades before the last verse. It's not about ego. Jeannie Seely has no hunger for headlines. It's about connection, about the aching realization that the people who truly knew her, who shared the road, the stage, the long talks between gigs, are mostly gone now, and those who remain are busy chasing their own spotlight, their own battles. There's a photo on her fridge, her and Willie Nelson, arm in arm, laughing like kids. It's faded now, the corners are curling. She sees it every day and wonders when the world will ask her to tell the story behind it. Not in a podcast, not in a tribute show, but while she's still here, to speak it. Because the real fear isn't being forgotten after death. It's being invisible while you're still alive. At 85 years old, Jeannie Seely doesn't perform as often as she used to. Her knees ache in the cold. Her voice, though still laced with honey and heartbreak, tires easier after a long set. But every now and then, when the stars align, the weather is kind, and the pain isn't too sharp, she takes the stage at the Grand Ole Opry. Not for the cameras, not for the money, for the promise she made to herself long ago. As long as I can still sing, I'll keep showing up. She doesn't do wardrobe changes anymore. No more glitter lashes or big hair. These days, she walks out in a plain black jacket, sometimes a scarf wrapped around her throat to keep the chill off. The spotlight hits her silver curls, and for a brief second, you can almost see the glow she carried in 1966. The crowd rises before she opens her mouth. Some stand because they know the history. Others because their parents told them to. But every person in that room feels the weight of the moment. This isn't just another set. This is living history. She usually opens with "Don't touch me." Still the same lyrics. still the same trembling strength behind them. But now, the meaning hits different. It's no longer the cry of a young woman resisting a love she can't have. It's the echo of a woman who's outlived nearly everyone who ever held her. After the applause fades, she thanks the crowd like she always does. But lately, her voice gets a little softer. The thank yous carry more weight, like she knows, deep down, that each one might be the last. When she steps off the stage, there's no limo waiting. No flashy entourage, just a friend or two from the Opry staff, a ride home, maybe a cup of tea if she's not too tired. She'll get home, slip off her boots, and sit in the same chair she always does, facing the same old TV she barely watches. And in that silence, she sometimes wonders if it all meant anything. But here's the truth. It did. Jeannie Seely isn't a footnote in country music. She is country music. She lived it, bled for it, survived it. She paved roads others now stroll down without ever knowing who laid the gravel. And yet, she's still here. Not just surviving, still giving, still showing up, still singing through the pain. She may never get the movie, the museum wing, the major network tribute she deserves, but the people who know, the real fans, the old musicians, the heartbroken poets of Nashville, they know. And in the quiet corners of the Opry, when the lights dim and the stars go home, her voice still lingers. Because Jeannie Seely doesn't need a final bow. She's already become the song that never truly ends. Jeannie Seely is done playing nice. Because hidden beneath decades of standing ovations and rhinestone gowns is a secret, one she swore she'd take to her grave. But something changed. A letter resurfaced. A name reappeared. And a woman who once held the Opry together with her bare hands is finally telling the truth about what nearly tore her apart. What happened backstage during a power outage in 1971? Why did she burn one of her own dresses in the parking lot that night? And why, for over 50 years, did the Opry avoid mentioning what she saw in room 6B? The answer haunted her, until now. Long before the secret, long before room 6B, before the dress went up in flames. Jeannie Seely was just a girl with calloused hands and a voice too big for her Pennsylvania hometown. Her father worked at the local steel mill. Her mother sang hymns while scrubbing floors. There were no music agents, no industry contacts, just static-filled country radio and a head full of dreams. At 16, she mailed off lyrics to a publishing house in Nashville. Got no reply. But she didn't stop. At 21, she packed a single suitcase and a half-used typewriter and headed south. By the time she hit Tennessee, she was nearly broke, but not broken. She took temp jobs, slept in borrowed rooms, wrote at night, and sang in places where nobody clapped. Then one night at a smoky club on the outskirts of town, a man in the back handed her a card. He'd just heard her sing a song that would soon become "Don't Touch Me." And like that, her voice was on the radio. The awards came. The money followed. But the respect? That took longer. Because Jeannie didn't fit. Not by their standards. She wore short skirts and eyeliner. She cracked jokes. She didn't call men sir unless they earned it. And worst of all, she sang like she meant every damn word. Her songs weren't dainty heartbreaks. They were firestorms, desire, guilt, power, regret. When she first stepped onto the Opry stage, she was warned, no dancing, no deep cleavage, no talking back. She nodded, smiled, and did it all anyway. Behind closed doors, The men running the Opry didn't know what to do with her. She was too talented to cut, but too bold to trust. They tried to box her in, gave her bad time slots, paired her with acts that didn't respect her, whispered things behind her back loud enough for her to hear. But she kept showing up, night after night. And when her name finally got added to the official rotation, she became the first woman to regularly host the Grand Ole Opry. People clapped. She smiled. But nobody saw what it cost her behind the curtain. Because that same year was the first time she was ever called down to room 6B, and the first time she ever thought about walking away from it all. She didn't ask to go. You didn't get invited to room 6B, you were summoned. It was early 1971. A storm had knocked out power to half the Opry House. The stage lights flickered. Backup generators kicked in. The crowd never noticed a thing. But backstage, everything changed. A stagehand handed Jeannie a folded piece of paper. No words, just a room number. And a time. Room 6B. She'd never heard of it before. It wasn't on the standard maps or hallway lists. Down past the green rooms, beyond the costume storage. No nameplate, just a brass knob and a faint hum behind the door. Like static or breath. She opened it. Inside, one lamp, one chair, one man. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. He was one of the quiet bosses, the men who didn't show up in photos but ran the Opry like it was their personal church. He looked her up and down, not with interest, but with calculation. Then he asked her a question she's never repeated out loud. Her answer didn't matter, because his message wasn't a request. It was a warning. Jeannie walked out 11 minutes later, pale, silent. She went straight to the parking lot, took off her dress, one of her favorites, a blue sequined number with rhinestone trim, and set it on fire. Nobody knew why, but a janitor saw the smoke, said she stood there, watching it burn like it was a person. She never wore blue on stage again. After that night, things shifted. Her set lists were shortened, her introductions left out. Rumors spread about her being difficult. One producer pulled her from a Saturday show and replaced her with a male newcomer who forgot half his lines. But she kept coming back, kept hosting, kept smiling. And once, just once, she confronted that same man from room 6B in the hallway. He said only 5 words before walking away. "Careful, sweetheart. You're not untouchable." That night, she started locking her dressing room and writing letters. Some she mailed, most she hid in a box under her bed. Letters she hoped no one would ever need to read. Until now. They weren't diaries, they weren't songs, and they sure weren't written for sympathy. They were records, typed out on onion skin paper with her old manual typewriter, always dated, always signed, each one a snapshot of something she wasn't allowed to say out loud. The glances, the threats, the stage cues that mysteriously changed, the times her mic didn't turn on, the night she walked out to silence while the curtain stayed down on purpose. Jeannie Seely wrote it all down. Every slight, every humiliation, every name. And she kept those letters in a shoebox under her bed, wrapped in a faded red scarf her mother gave her before she left Pennsylvania. The box was locked. She never told anyone the combination, not even her husband. She called it her insurance policy. But to her, it wasn't about revenge. It was about proof. Because one of the cruelest tricks the Opry played on its women was making them believe none of it was real. that they were just sensitive, that they took things too personal, that no one else had a problem but them. Jeannie knew better. She'd seen how they treated Dottie West before her death. She'd heard the way they spoke about Patsy behind closed doors, that mouthy broad, that little drunk, that problem. She wasn't just writing for herself, she was documenting the pattern. But she never intended for anyone to read the letters. Not until the fire. In 1991, her second home caught fire in the middle of the night. Most of the house was spared, but her bedroom went up fast. Somehow, the shoebox survived. The heat melted the scarf, but the lock held, and inside, every single letter was intact. That night, as she sat on her porch surrounded by ash, she opened the box for the first time in years. And what she read didn't feel like her life anymore. It felt like a story someone else had lived. Someone trapped, erased, controlled. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just whispered to the wind, "I wasn't crazy." That was the night she made a new plan. Not to burn the letters, not to hide them, but to wait for the right moment, to use them. And as she turned 90, that moment finally came. It was just after sunset when the knock came. Jeannie Seely was in her kitchen, barefoot, brewing her usual evening tea. By then, she'd stopped expecting visitors. Most folks her age were either gone or long retired from calling. But this knock was different, soft, hesitant, almost reverent. Standing at the door was a young woman no older than 30, wide-eyed, nervous, clutching a folder to her chest like it might disappear. She introduced herself only by first name. Said she was working on a graduate thesis about forgotten women of country music. She had driven 6 hours just hoping to meet Jeannie, even for 5 minutes. Jeannie almost sent her away, until the woman said, "Room 6B." Everything went still. Nobody knew about that room. Not unless they were there. Not unless they were summoned. Not unless they had something to lose. But this girl, she had nothing to lose. Only something to give. She reached into the folder and pulled out a photocopy. It was one of the letters. Not a duplicate. A scan. Dated June 15, 1971. Typed in Jeannie's unmistakable format. A full account of her second visit to Room 6B. Names, threats, the handshake deal she was forced to accept, and the line that sealed it all. "If I speak of this again, I will be removed from the stage before I finish my next verse." Jeannie's blood ran cold. She asked where the girl found it. That's when the story unraveled. Apparently, in a backroom closet at the Opry's archival wing, one not open to the public, this letter was misfiled inside a stack of stage diagrams. A former employee had tucked it there, likely without permission. Maybe he meant to return it. Maybe he meant to leak it. But there it was, preserved, quietly waiting. The girl found it while researching floor layouts. She said she read it 3 times before realizing what it was. She copied it, then sealed it back in place. Jeannie asked why she brought it to her. The girl paused and said, "Because I think they've done this to others, and I think they'll do it again." That night, Jeannie didn't sleep. She opened the old shoebox, reread every letter, and realized the silence she'd protected for 60 years was about to end. There had always been whispers about doors that didn't appear on any blueprint, about tapes that vanished from the sound booth, about Opry members who stepped away after asking the wrong questions. But most of all, there was the hallway, a narrow, windowless stretch that led behind the oldest part of the building. Maintenance called it a service wing. Tour guides skipped it entirely. But insiders knew this was where the real decisions got made, where the men in tailored suits and smoky voices gathered behind closed doors and rewrote careers like pages in a script. Jeannie had walked that hallway only twice in her life. Both times, it ended with room 6B. But when the young researcher returned a week later, carrying floor plans, records, and a notebook full of hand-drawn maps, she said something Jeannie never expected to hear. Room 6B doesn't exist anymore. According to updated architectural documents, the room had been walled off in the late 1990s. No permit, no renovation notes, just a blank space where a door once stood, like it had never been there at all. And yet, it had. Jeannie remembered the rug pattern, the sound of the old radiator, the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a boot print. She wasn't imagining it, but someone wanted everyone else to think she was. That night, she pulled out a photo album and flipped to a picture taken backstage in 1974. In the far left corner, barely visible, was a brass doorknob and a plaque. 6B. She mailed a copy of that photo to the young woman along with a note. "If anything happens to me, you tell them I tried to tell the truth." Because the erasure wasn't just about the room. It was about everything that happened inside it. The deals, the silence, the power imbalance that was never spoken aloud, only understood in glances and locked doors. Jeannie had never considered herself brave. She considered herself smart, careful, alive. But as the Opry continued celebrating its polished legacy, rerunning specials, honoring its gentleman pioneers, Jeannie knew the shine had come at a cost. And somewhere, beneath that new drywall and glossy branding, the old secrets were still breathing, waiting. By the time Jeannie Seely reached her late 80s, most of the women who had walked those same halls with her were gone. Some died quietly, others faded into obscurity, and a few, too many, left behind nothing but questions. Dottie West's car crash was called a tragedy, but Jeannie remembered the months before, the canceled shows, the odd phone calls, the way Dottie had started to say things on stage she never used to. Loretta Lynn's strokes and strange final interviews raised eyebrows too. She once told Jeannie, "They don't want us around when we start talking too much." Then came Naomi Judd, gone under a dark cloud, with whispers swirling about what she'd uncovered in her final months. All of them had stories. All of them had scars. And all of them, at one point, had been asked to just trust the Opry. Jeannie had seen the pattern. Women pushed out, rewritten, or reduced. If they aged out, they were forgotten. If they pushed back, they were unstable. If they stayed too long, well, the industry had ways of tightening the noose without leaving a mark. She remembered when Patsy Cline started questioning management. How quickly she was labeled difficult. And when Skeeter Davis criticized the church's grip on the industry, she was banned from the Opry for a decade. Jeannie never forgot that. She still had the letter Skeeter mailed her from Kentucky, scrawled in blue ink. "They're not mad at what I said. They're mad I said it where people could hear." Now in her quiet little home on the edge of Nashville, Jeannie kept a new kind of list. Not just of names, but of patterns. Who vanished when? Who stopped getting calls? Who retired after one too many unanswered questions? The saddest part? There was never a proper send-off. No tribute, no curtain call, just a gentle erasing, as if they'd never been center stage. as if the applause had never happened. And yet, their voices still echoed. In the cracks of the old floorboards, in the smell of the dressing room powder, in Jeannie's memory. That's when she knew the truth couldn't stay locked away any longer. Because if she stayed silent, they'd erase her too. Jeannie Seely never thought she'd outlive them all. She didn't drink much, never smoked past her 30s, but she never lived cautiously either. She sang hard, loved harder, and kept showing up night after night, even when the standing ovations turned into polite nods, even when the dressing room moved farther from the main hall, even when the phone stopped ringing after the holidays. And yet, she was still here. At 90, she moved a little slower, needed help with the zipper on her stage gowns, but her mind, sharp as ever. She remembered dates, names, who looked her in the eye and who didn't. And when a new generation of women entered the Opry, young, hopeful, unaware, she watched them with a strange mix of pride and dread. Because she knew what the place could do to you. And now, she knew she couldn't protect them by staying quiet. So she started to speak. Quietly at first. A conversation at a tribute show. A quote in a local interview. Hints. Memories. Warnings. Then came the memoir. Quietly self-published, barely promoted, but dangerous all the same. Inside were pieces of the letters, redacted names, footnotes, disguised truths. Enough to make people uncomfortable. Enough to make a few calls stop coming. Enough to get a midnight knock on her door from a former Opry tech who just said, "I read it, and I believe every word." There were no lawsuits, no angry press conferences, just silence, which, to Jeannie, said more than words ever could. In the months that followed, something strange happened. A new Opry policy passed, one that protected on-site performers and staff from undue backstage influence. A few producers quietly stepped down. A handful of young women reached out privately to thank her. And one evening, as she stood in the wings, cane in hand, waiting to go on stage for what might be the last time, a young singer brushed past her, turned, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting them bury you." Jeannie smiled, because she knew now, legacy isn't built on what they let you say. It's built on what you say anyway. The Grand Ole Opry stage has seen it all: rising stars, final performances, standing ovations, and sudden exits. But it has never seen another Jeannie Seely. She didn't leave with a bang. She didn't ask for a tribute. She just stopped showing up one day. No farewell special, no gold watch. Just an empty stool and a silence that felt heavier than usual. But something had changed. Her memoir, once overlooked, began circulating quietly among younger artists. Copies shared backstage. Pages dog-eared and highlighted. A new generation began to ask quiet questions, and in hallways long thought to be soundproof, whispers returned. And at the heart of it all was Jeannie's final act. She donated the shoebox. Every letter, every name, every date, placed into the hands of a country music archive outside of Opry control. Sealed for public release, unless something happened to her. That was the deal. The minute someone tried to erase her, the lid would come off. The Opry hasn't touched her legacy since. These days, she sits on her porch just outside Nashville. Her bones ache. Her voice isn't what it was, but the fire's still in her eyes. When asked in a rare interview what she'd say to the Opry now, she only shrugged and said, "I gave you my best years. You gave me your rules. I outlived them. There are still photos of her hanging in the backstage hall. No one dares take them down. Because the truth is, she's not just a survivor of the Opry's golden age. She's its witness. The keeper of secrets. The woman who refused to be silenced. And no matter how many renovations they do, how many press releases they write, or how many curtain calls they choreograph, there will always be a song echoing in the rafters they can't control. A song written in memory, in pain, in legacy. The one Jeannie Seely never stopped singing, even when no one else dared hum along.